Hello and welcome to the Sports Club podcast at the Jamaica Observer. We are coming to you from the National Stadium, and this podcast is really supposed to have been filled with so much excitement and happiness, and we're supposed to be celebrating the fact that Jamaica qualified for the World Cup in 2026, USA, Canada and Mexico. But alas, alas, that's not what we're doing. And it's a little disappointing, if I'm to be honest with you. But we're here to discuss all things Reggae Boyz. And would it become a little bit toxic? I'm not sure. It depends on what my analysts say to that. Brian Pitter and Daniel Blake here with me in the grandstand, which was jam-packed, actually. 35,000 strong, cheering on the Reggae Boyz who did little on the field of play, and we're going to be talking about that. Brian, less than 24 hours after the fact, it still hurts.
It's ironic that you said they did little. They did a lot. My emotions right now is still, all over the place. Depressed is an understatement. I mean, many Jamaicans would have gone home last night feeling so defeated, so dejected.
Mm-hmm.
We had the opportunities. We didn't take our chances. Just the same thing that we've been speaking about, when we criticize this Reggae Boyz team. We hit the post, we hit the bar twice, the post once. Unfortunate, but, I feel like we should have played much better than we did last night. But, the person who was responsible, I feel, for it resigned at the end of the game. And I guess we'll be talking more about that.
Yeah, we will. Daniel, your initial thoughts on the result and Jamaica not qualifying directly to the World Cup via this route?
It's one of those days where you don't necessarily want to say "I told you so," but it's so difficult because there is a hope inside of you that tries to defy actual logic. But seeing what Steve McClaren has done in his 16 months here, particularly over the last 3 months, none of this should be a surprise to any of us. I know that we were hoping that, we're going to use the motivation of what happened because of Hurricane Melissa, the fact that, we'd have ended, 28 years of not going to the World Cup, that would all elevate the team right to USA, Mexico, and Canada. But if you watched the 95 minutes last night, it's the team who was playing for a draw. They were more likely to win, and not necessarily because of any special counter attack or because we were going all out. They were just far better. Team selection, like I keep saying, terrible, and I have to give him some credit for resigning because, there are some coaches who would be defiant, even though he would have been fired. Let's get that straight. He would have been fired. But to realize to himself that the one thing I was told to do, I haven't done, so I'm going to step away. Saving the JFF million, so I'll give him credit for that. But what happened last night shouldn't have been a surprise. It still hurts because seeing the general optimism from those fans, like I've never experienced that before. I wasn't here in '97 to see that.
You weren't?
No, you were for sure, but I was not. So to then see my people, especially those who came here from St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland and Mobay, for them to come here and experience that, it hurts, but wasn't a surprise.
I want to get right into the nitty-gritty of it because you mentioned just now, Daniel, about not picking the right 11, and I really want to look into those narratives, and I want to start with Brian on this, right? Because I'm sure you feel the same way in terms of not necessarily picking the best 11s, but off here we're talking about the fact that we really have no midfielders in the squad to really choose from. So based on who he assembled, why do you think that he got the 11s wrong time and time again?
Well, based on the trend that we've been seeing, and you really don't want to be divisive, but the majority of the starting 11 that he picks is predominantly English-based players. I know we have a lot of English-based players in our squad, but when you look, for example, in Trinidad game, he said he didn't start it Shamar Nicholson because Boza was on a yellow card. But he's our best striker. You called him the best striker in the Caribbean in the press
McLaren
conference.
did, right.
McLaren did the day before. We need to win. That's a crucial game. We don't go away to Trinidad and play for a draw. We need to win. So you start your best players. Demar Gray has been in the best of form for us. He's come back to somewhat of himself at Birmingham this season, but when he plays for Jamaica, he has been his best of form. And as soon as he was available again, he went straight back into the team. Dixon, who has been performing so well for us as a super sub, brings that energy, brings that tenacity, brings that pressing that we need to compete. Was benched again, left out again. Whisper, who is an exceptional talent, only gets 10 minutes last night. There's certain things that he does which you don't really understand as a Jamaican, as a supporter, as somebody who knows the sport, knows what we need to win. So I don't know if it's a preference that he has, but he keeps selecting the same players who aren't necessarily performing at their best for us all the time, and I don't know why.
Daniel, do you think it's that he felt comfortable with the players who he would have called up, the English-based players, the traditional names, so to speak? I mean, everybody knows of Demarai Gray and players of that ilk, and yeah, they do have reputation to thrill and excel, based on, if you're a casual football lover, based on clips that you probably see on YouTube and say, yeah man, definitely need for day 11, need for start. But if you really look at how Jamaica plays, on an intimate, personal level, you realize that there are certain aspects that we need and certain things that we don't need. And those on the bench, especially the youngsters, should have the opportunity to prove themselves time and time again. And that probably was missing. I don't know if you agree with me or what Brian has said as well.
I think Steve McClaren, if you don't mind me going off on a tangent a little bit, I think if he goes to an all-inclusive hotel, he would be lost. Because he would go to the buffet, realize that there are 3 or 4 good dishes, and then the next day he would come and see those exact 3 or 4 dishes and decides to go back to the same British food that he's been eating his whole life because that's what he's used
He's afraid of change.
He's afraid of change, but also his changes aren't, they don't make any sense. So the September window, back-to-back wins Trinidad and Bermuda. He said, he's finally starting to see the team gel. What is the first thing he does in the October window against Curaçao? He makes about 5 or 6 changes. And then he says to himself, well, that was a mistake. We're going to play Bermuda here. We're going to start Shamar Nicholson, who I didn't put my trust in. Kaheem Dixon, who over the last 12 months I've been saying, this kid is special, but I'm finally going to trust him. They win big, and yes, it's Bermuda, but you have finally said at the end, the team is coming together. I just need maybe Leon and Demari to come back, and everything is great. What does he do against Trinidad? His 4th string striker, Romain Borrell, is now your number 9. So you overlook Nicholson, you overlook Kadamar Terry, you overlook Warner Brown, who you just a few months ago said he was undroppable. Now Romain Borrell comes out of nowhere. And it's not just that, it's just every single position. So you like Ian Frey, you like Lemby Kisa, but all of a sudden Holgate starts at right back because you didn't want to risk them getting a yellow card for Curaçao rather than winning Trinidad and come here and let Curaçao probably self-implode. All of his decisions just don't make sense. And the biggest one for me is Bobby Reid. Now, I've been watching football for a very long time. I know he says he's played there for Leicester City, but if you guys can pull up any Premier League video and show me where you saw Bobby Reid playing number 6, 8, or 10, I will literally take you out to a 5-star dinner. If you're able to show me that. Every time our midfield was wide open. It was because Bobby Reed actually just didn't know where to be.
Yeah.
Him and Shamar Nicholson end up pressing the same player, which, I mean, that's basic football. And the Bakuna brothers were just like, oh, thank you. So it's this sense of I don't want to fail, so I'm going to go to what I believe is comfortable. So even if I do make changes, it's a comfortable change. I'm not going to start Whisper even though I know he's our best winger. I'm not going to start Kaheem Dixon because he's always going to give me energy. I'm going to start the same players who I know will disappoint, but at least I have substitutions to make. I just don't understand it.
But even to add to that, though, if you realize that we don't have a midfield, right, you'd expect a coach of his stature to make, some tactical changes. For example, if it's even to go to 3 at the back and have the 2 wing backs invert to create more space in the midfield so that we are able to compete numerically against our opponents in the midfield. Do something like that, But it's the same tactics, if you want to call it that, from Steve McClaren. The same thing that he does every single game. He makes the same changes constantly, and it's not working. But then you also have to think, who are his advisors around him? What was the reason for bringing Speed into that role where you advise the coach? What is Speed saying to him? Should they be held responsible as well? Know that McLaren has resigned. What about their position? They're the ones that decided to keep McLaren after the Gold Cup. So it's not just McLaren. I think it's a systematic problem that we've been having for quite some time that needs urgent fixing.
Yeah, I do agree that there's a systematic issue. And one of the biggest issues I have when McLaren was hired is that his resume is great, but there's a reason why his last head coach job before this was in 2019 when he failed with QPR.
Yeah, but in the release they sent out, they said that he was an ultra-modern coach. You disagree with that release?
Who said that, JFF?
The JFF in that release, I remember that they were looking for. Not when they hired him. That was the idea before they hired him.
Yeah.
That they were seeking an ultra modern coach, and the next thing I heard is that Steve McClaren was coming to Jamaica.
I mean, his general style of play is not the typical long ball British type. It's more of a possession.
So
type.
it's ultra modern.
I wouldn't say it's.
It's so modern. We haven't really seen it like that before.
I was not a fan of his appointment, but I think the world realized that this man could no longer lead teams, and that's why he ended up doing work with FIFA. That's why he ended up being the 4th string coach at United. No disrespect to him there, because
or United for that matter.
To go back to Manchester United at a time when they were trying to get back to their glory days is a big job. But for him to leave there to come here and for us to give him the keys when he had proven time and time again over his previous 3 or 4 jobs that he was losing it, I mean,
they went for him because of his man management, I'm assuming, right? That was the reason. Because it's not for his tactical mind, I don't think. And you'd think that was the reason that they would have inserted a Maron Gordon, and in the end,
if you wanted a man manager, you hire Terry Carell, you hire Nicole Campbell, you hire those people. They know how to get the best out of you and create a great atmosphere. If you want to qualify for a World Cup, you hire a good coach because his tactics tell the tale. Curaçao, on the other hand, Dick Advocat hasn't been known for his great man management, but what he's a great tactician. Mm-hmm. So even from the Netherlands, watching probably from his iPad, was still able to outcoach Steve McClaren, who was right here on the sidelines.
Yeah. Let's look specifically at the game, and I felt so sorry for Dexter Lembikisa in that game, shooting it right back.
Yeah.
He
looked out of it, didn't he? Yeah.
Out of it.
Yeah.
He couldn't defend to save his life on certain occasions.
I know I've been defending him a lot, because I've always regarded him as one of our most consistent.
I mean, he's young,
players.
right? Early 20s.
Yeah, I don't know what happened the last night, but it wasn't just him. It was pretty much. It was only Andre Blake who really performed really well last night. But
I have to give Richard King his credit as well, because I thought he was the best defender on the night,
I guess.
comfortably.
I guess. Yes, Richard King has been a standout for us. I wasn't particularly impressed with his long balls, though. I think a lot of his passing didn't really meet
To be
the
fair,
target.
Cephas was outnumbered
But
on quite a few occasions on the
right,
left hand side. Mind you, it was
yeah.
a little bit monotonous,
Yes, well, that's true.
so there was a lack of variety. But yeah,
Right, but if you're going to look at individual performances, Lembikisa definitely. And at one point, I think he moved from right back. McLaren realized that he was struggling, and put him more centrally throughout the first half. I don't know if you realized that, which I found very strange. But I don't know if it was a matter of fitness because he hasn't really been playing much club football.
that's true.
Either. But when you look at the replacement that we have for Lembikisa, who are going to replace him with?
Well, in the end, they put on Whisper in a right wing back role. So.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there we go with the tactics again. It's certain things that you see happening. It's when you look at football elsewhere and how it's supposed to happen and how football teams are supposed to run. What we're doing is very mediocre, and you have to wonder, who is advising, Steve McClaren, because you regard him as a really a high caliber coach. He was on Manchester United's treble winning coaching staff, and he came back again. So you know his resume, you know his status. It's not like he's a poor coach. That's arguable. But you have to really wonder, why do we keep making these same mediocre, childish mistakes in management and in tactics constantly? I don't understand it.
And the leadership, especially at the back, like I was particularly disappointed with Ethan Pinnock, and not just last night, but in previous encounters where he just felt as if he was not into it and wasn't purposeful in a number of things that he did. Almost conceded a goal last night as well. I mean, I'd love to get into his head and find exactly what's going on there, because obviously there's a level of responsibility that he holds. What could have possibly gone wrong?
I
with
tell you
him?
what, though, you see leadership. It's all about. A team is a reflection of its coach and its leader. These are players that play at some of them at the highest level. They're not poor players. When Ethan Pinnock goes back to Brentford, I saw a speech that former Brentford manager Thomas Frank gave to Ethan Pinnock last season, saying that he's one of the most consistent players for the team, one of the leaders for the team, and this is Brentford who are one of the best teams, mid-table teams in the English Premier League, and he constantly turns up for them. But when we see these players come and put on the Jamaica jersey, it's as if they forget how to play football. They look like a fish out of water. You go back to the same Liam Bailey situation. He had an amazing season with Aston Villa two seasons ago. But even during that season when he came to play for Jamaica, it was nothing special. Demarai Gray is the same thing. And the list goes on and on. So what is it that is causing these players who are clearly talented, when they come to Jamaica, they don't really put in the work or the talent that we know that they have? I'm not sure what's happening.
So it's a matter that the togetherness just wasn't there. You know what was interesting? What was interesting is that we heard in the grapevine that the players were consulted. I think it was after the Gold Cup. You can correct me if I was wrong, as to whether they should keep Steve McClaren as head coach, and basically they said, sure, we have no problem with it. They I think they kind of accepted their own responsibility in what happened at the CONCACAF World Cup and decided that the coach wasn't the issue. But when you said that the players are a reflection of the coach,
Yeah.
it kind of now goes hand in hand as to what exactly is happening here.
But they did admit the coach was the issue, though. They said that they were considering to let him go, but they decided to give him an opportunity again.
The players?
No, JFF.
No,
Yeah.
the JFF is fine, but I think the JFF consulted with
Oh,
the
the
players
players. Okay.
who gave the thumbs up and said,
Yeah.
no, we're good here.
I'm not sure about that. I guess Daniel will probably have a bit more insight into that.
Should the,
I mean, regardless of if the players gave the thumbs up or not, it doesn't mean that he was still the right person for the job.
That's true.
I think that if you were to assess his track record, honestly. Forget about the fact that we were about to go into World Cup qualifying. If you looked at our Nations League performances, what we did in the Gold Cup qualifiers and the Gold Cup, if you were to look at his statistics there and say, is this somebody we want to keep, not just for the short term, but for the long term of our program, the overwhelming answer would have been no. I think it's because they did not want to necessarily disrupt what was happening, and that the main aim was the World Cup. That was the message throughout the entire thing. So even when Hallgrimsson was here, so we feel that the Copa and everybody was like, well, yeah, the World Cup is the main goal. When just a few days later we see Hallgrimsson in a green shirt, planning to go to Ireland. All right, so we fail against the USA in the Nations League, and everybody's like, oh yeah, okay, fine, but the World Cup is our goal. Gold Cup, we look terrible, but it's like, all right, it means that we now must go. So it's this.
We're moving the goalposts all the time.
Yeah.
So it's this cycle of, yes, we're
Excuses.
failing, but let's wait because we know that is the World Cup is the pre. So despite us looking bad in almost every precursor to the World Cup qualifying, it's just like, let's ignore it, because when that time comes, everything will gel. And, and football just doesn't work that way.
I think one of the other factors as well, and in speaking to Michael Ricketts, the president of the Jamaica Football Federation, he always mentions investment. McLaren was paid a lot of money. They didn't want to disclose exactly how much, but if Hallgrimsson was being paid 75 million, you can just imagine how much McLaren was being paid. So to not let him go, it's like we invested so much in this manager, and this is during the time of the Gold Cup. We invested so much. Let's give him another opportunity to see if our investment will pay off. It clearly didn't. I think the better option would have been to call it a loss, because the same mistakes he's making now was the same mistakes he was making then. And if we actually were serious about qualifying for the World Cup, we should have made that decision then to let him go.
And Brian brings up a very good point, because in speaking to my sources and just from what I've been seeing, McLaren has gotten the most support from the JFF in maybe since Rene Simo is back in the 90s.
Well, wait, there may be an exclusive article that says otherwise in due course.
No, whether he says otherwise or not, I know that for a fact. If you look, even if you were to just look at it from a layman's perspective, previously Tapper was asking about, he wanted a video analyst or he wanted more coaches or whatever. Hallgrimsson came in, had to settle with certain things because they weren't willing to at the time, they were in a lot of financial issues, so he wasn't able to get everything. Steve McClaren was able to bring in Trevor Spencer from overseas, the goalkeeper coach, who ended up resigning, but they still decided to keep him on because he's been with the team. Ian Burnchall, who was with the Wolves team and Forest Green. I think he's had maybe 2 or 3 video analysts. So they have literally spent a whole lot on that. His recruitment, getting players' passports, investing in their flights and everything. So it's one of the reasons why they feel particularly hurt by his performances, because they have literally given him everything he needs. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not particularly blaming them for it, because I think in previous years, people are saying, well, them never support Tapper enough, them never support this coach, that coach enough. Steve McClaren got all the support he needed. He even said it in the statement. He said, Speed and Ricketts, they ensured I got everything. But it just didn't show out there. And I think, which is why I go back to saying I give him some credit for walking away, because that at least shows me that he's man enough to realize I'm not good enough for this job. But it's just disappointing, because no other coach in the history of Jamaican football would have gotten an easier path to a World Cup than this. And knowing his resume, even if he coached at least 40% we should have qualified.
You know, we look at his assistants, and we're basically, you know, saying that probably the entire deck should be cleared. So we are talking about Meron Gordon, especially, who would have been um, there throughout even previous coaches, right? But we don't know the extent of his influence behind the scenes. So for us to just say that, okay, he should go to, and again, we don't know the influence of a Rudolph Speed as well. So to say that, okay, he should go to, well, maybe in terms of
Yeah, but
his
Speed is the head of the
chief
technical
role
committee.
of being head of the
Yeah.
committee,
Who selects the coach?
who selects the coach
Yeah.
and has been selecting the coaches for a while
Yeah.
now, unsuccessfully
Yeah.
so. Should there be more than the Steve McClaren
Yes,
casualty?
of course. Listen, everybody said it. If we don't qualify for the World Cup, just stop watch football. Just cut the football program. You know the exaggeration that
This
many
could
of
be a
us
hurricane shelter right now, the National Stadium, I suppose.
yeah, and we don't have any use for it because what's the point? This is the easiest opportunity that we've gotten, we probably ever will get, to qualify for the World Cup, and we threw it away, and it wasn't like we didn't try. We just no, we didn't try. That's what I should say, but it's the mistakes that we made along the way, the simple mistakes that we made. And even in making those mistakes, we didn't adjust to them, even when we still had time to adjust and recover. And I think something like this, disappointment like this, and unachievement of not qualifying for the World Cup, given this context, I think other persons should be held responsible other than Steve McClaren. The entire selection process, the entire selection team, I should say, they should be questioned. There should be, even, I think, Ricketts, I didn't get an opportunity to ask him whether he thinks his job as, his position as the JFF president should be questioned as well. But I think, now is the time to question everything because this was the opportunity of a lifetime to qualify for the World Cup, and we did.
I'm not at that stage as yet. Simply because I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, but if you are the JFF technical committee led by Rudolph Speed and you get these applicants and you decide to select this particular manager, and then you end up with the easiest, quote unquote, easiest group in World Cup qualifying history, and the coach doesn't go out there and does his job, are you really, I know you are the one who did the hiring, but are you really responsible? Yes, you are the technical advisor, but Donald, if I told you that don't wear that shirt tomorrow and you come back and wear that shirt, what more do you want me to
Yeah,
do?
but we really don't know if that took place behind the scenes. We don't know how much of an influence was there, and if he had given advice that was completely turned.
I can tell you that a lot of advice was given.
And
Not all of it was taken.
not all of it
So
was
advice
taken.
was given to Steve McClaren.
Yes.
But not
Okay.
all of it was taken.
Yeah, because you are a technical advisor. An advisor is there to advise. It's not a technical instructor. You get what I'm saying? So as much as you can say, well, I believe that you should do this, I believe that you should do that. I mean, sometimes the coach will take it, but at the end of the day, he is the head coach. He's going to go out there and do what he wants. Meron Gordon might see something, Trevor Spencer might see something. In fact, the players themselves might see something. But if the head coach himself believes that's the way he wants to do things, it's very hard to stop him from doing so, especially somebody with that type of pedigree. Maybe he's thinking that, well, I have done it. I have been with Sir Alex. I was most recently with Eric Ten Hag, leading him to the FA Cup. So yeah, your advice is good, and yes, it's great, but I'm not necessarily going to take everything. So in terms of a mass clear out or a mass questioning, I believe everybody should be questioned, yes. But in terms of the clear out, I'm not so sure about that.
Listen, this is much more deeper than just Steve McClaren. And the reason why I say everyone should be questioned is because it's not just about the coaching on the field and the coaching today. It's the fact that we still don't have a system that represents Jamaica. We still don't know, how does Jamaica play football. There's a lot of things that really goes behind us not qualifying to the World Cup. It's not just team selection. We go there, we don't look like a team. We don't play. Curaçao was so much more structured than us. It's not even about tactics. It's just common basic football, and we don't. We look so lost. So where is that coming from? That doesn't start from the national team. It starts from behind the scenes, the grassroots programs, stuff like that. Where is the vision from the persons?
Gosh, we've been saying this for years,
But that's
though,
what
right?
that's what I'm saying. And it's the same people in charge.
Well,
So we need some fresh faces.
I-
We need some new thinking.
I will admit that they are trying because they have appointed a whole new set of youth coaches. So Vassar Reynolds, Andrew Peart, all these, they will coach under 20, under 17, under 15 program in hopes that there is a style of play going forward. And Speed himself said he's been trying to do that, which is why he was so meticulous with his coaching appointments. But I think this is probably a blessing in disguise because, I mean, if we did qualify, let's say we did do the basics right, it wouldn't remove the fact that we don't have a style of play,
True.
It doesn't, so in a sense, I think that
But a couple years ago, when we never even go to the final round, you'd think that would be the catalyst to actually.
no,
start
no,
something.
we've had many catalysts, 2002, 6, 10,
Yeah.
14, 18. But I think we're now at a stage where, by the way, we still have a chance to qualify.
Yeah,
But
there's
I-
March.
but I-
Very, very, very slim.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is at least now, despite us still having that chance, there's a realization from everybody, from the head of the JFF to even the women cleaning here, that something needs to change and it needs to be done now.
So how much should we expect a clean slate for March? Because I spoke with the president Ricketts, and he said that maybe you'll choose from the batch of local coaches, good local coaches that we have, and you listed a few there who have been doing well at the youth level. So how much of a change are we looking at here, and should we go local?
Should we?
I mean, we ask this question every 3 or 4 years when a World Cup cycle is over, right?
Yeah.
And I've always said, I don't care if you were born here or born over there. I just need you to be a good coach.
Well, the salary dictates otherwise, I think.
I mean, I think what they will end up doing is going for a local coach, and who knows, they might end up seeing Speed on the sidelines. Who knows? But I'm saying, like, at this point, I don't think bringing in somebody who is unfamiliar will necessarily help because we have no more international windows to sort of prepare. So
So it has to be somebody who's there. So a Speed or a Maron Gordon,
Yeah.
they'd have to take over.
Yeah. Yeah. It wouldn't make sense to bring in I hear rumors about, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and, all of those. other
No, he
names,
doesn't believe in man managers.
Oh, well.
no, but Solskjaer, for example,
Solskjaer is a better man manager than
he
McLaren.
does have some tactical prowess about him because as much as some people think that Manchester United were on autopilot at times when he came in, he literally set up the team at least good enough so that they got results, and they ended up finishing second behind one of the best Premier League runs from Manchester City. Steve McClaren doesn't get the basics right in team selection. If he did that, for example, if Whisper had started on that right side in both games, if Lemby Kisa had started, if Shamar Nicholson had started, we'd be here, we'd be talking about our plans for USA getting our Canadian visa appointment, hoping that Trump don't kick us out. All of those things we'd be talking about.
Right.
But he did not get the basic right in just the lineup, so he could not do anything else right. So now we're going to have to hope that whether Speed, Maron Gordon, whoever has been with the team or has some idea of how the team plays and the players, they just need to go under the basics, right? But now it's going to be tougher because you're going to be playing better quality teams, in my opinion.
Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Sports Club podcast here at the National Stadium for the Jamaica Observer. It was a disappointing night last night with Jamaica failing to qualify through this simple process for the World Cup. But there is that final chance in March. 6 teams contesting 2 spots, and we will be there to try and get one of those 2 spots. Let's see what happens. So our plans that we had for the World Cup delayed at the very least
My heart can't take it
until
anymore.
a few months from now. And yeah, you're right, Brian. Our hearts can't take it, but at least there is some break in between. Well, between now and that time, right?
Yeah.
So we can prepare and have the necessary health checkup. But thanks for staying with us on behalf of the entire hardworking team, especially those behind the scenes. Goodbye from the National Stadium.